So welcome everyone to our first weekly conversation of CHIWORK, a symposium on human-computer interaction for work. And as you know, this is a new symposium, and it was born as a result of the series of conversations that Andrew and I ran since April 2020, together with Linda Boyle, John Lee, and Rafaela Sadoun. And we felt that the conversation were a great way to bring people together to meet on a weekly basis and really engage in in-depth discussion. And we wanted to replicate this success, but make it more formal and expand our team. So we have a fantastic team of volunteers. And if you are on gallery view, I'll ask all the volunteers to kind of wave and show yourself. We really have a fantastic team, and I'm thankful for everyone that kind of taking here the opportunity to make a difference and allow us to meet together in a new format. And talking about format, we will continue a format of a conversation. So this typically will be 30 minutes of recorded conversation with a speaker or a number of speakers. And this part of the conversation will be moderated. And then we'll turn off the cameras, we'll turn off the recording, we'll leave the cameras. And we're gonna have 30 minutes of informal discussion, hopefully the same kind of discussion that we would have after a talk when we're all in a physical space together. So we're going to have about 20 conversations this year. And if your research is related to the topic and you would like to present and be a speaker in this series, or if you would like to nominate someone else to be a speaker in this series, please use the form that some of our volunteers will put in the chat now. And this is the speaker nomination form. And we would like to make it much more participatory, in which we get to shape together the kind of conversations that we would like to have on the role of human-computer interaction in the future of work. So I'm going to ask Andrew to introduce our outstanding technical program committee. But before that, I just want to acknowledge the contribution of the National Science Foundation for partially supporting this activity. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Orit, and welcome everybody. It's wonderful to see this group. And yes, I'm just super pleased to introduce. It's truly a distinguished group of colleagues who have kindly agreed to serve as the technical program co-chairs for this inaugural CHIWORK. And I'll go in alphabetical order. So Anna Cox is a professor and vice dean of equality, diversity, inclusion at the UCL Faculty for Brain Sciences. She also established eWork Life, which is an interdisciplinary team of experts exploring the use of digital technology in work, life, and well-being. And I would encourage you to check out her podcast. Chris Janssen is assistant professor in experimental psychology at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. He's interested in understanding adaptive human behavior and human automation interaction. And actually, Chris just wrapped up as technical program co-chair for automotive UI. Neha Kumar is associate professor at Georgia Tech, and her research is at the intersection of human-centered computing and global development, and she's the president of ACM SIGCHI. Neha sends her regrets, and she cannot make it today. And Helena Mentis is professor at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. She is actually spending her sabbatical as a Fulbright scholar at the University of Copenhagen in Denmark. And her research contributes to the areas of human-computer interaction, computer-supported cooperative work, and health informatics. And she is the ACM SIGCHI past president. So thank you so much to the program co-chairs, and we're very much looking forward to the program that they're assembling for us over the next 9 months or so. And today, Orit and I were hoping to talk to them first about their views and their thoughts. So we asked them to give us maybe one take on the future of work and how it relates to HCI. So again, if maybe we'll go in alphabetical order. So maybe Anna, you can get us started.
The future of work is hybrid, at least for desk-based workers. And right now that's not looking like a great prospect, as it brings a set of problems. I'm going to outline just 3 and how I think HCI can help. Much of the work of desk-based workers is digital already, but is far from optimal. It has been designed to fracture our attention, which impedes our ability to feel like we're being productive. HCI research can help with improving the experience of getting work done, whether it is helping us to better avoid distractions, improving the experience of learning to use software, or designing tools to help us plan what we're going to do when. Much of the digital work done today and many of the digital workplaces that have been created has reduced the quality of experience of the worker, stripping them of worker rights and reducing their pay. HCI research can help by focusing on how we design digital work tasks that people find interesting and fulfilling and supporting, rather than challenging equity and inclusion in the workplace. And finally, many of the technologies we use for work negatively impact the lives of workers when they're not working. Our technologies have been designed to blur the boundaries between home and work, making people feel as though they've lost important parts of their personal lives. HCI research can help by further integrating the types of questions we ask so that we don't just focus on the task at hand or the shape of the job or the impact on other aspects of life, but instead try to bring those things together to better understand the impact of a single technology across the range of spheres on which it has influence, and thus help to create nuanced discussions about the roles that technologies play than those we see in the media today.
Thank you. Chris, would you like to go next?
Sure. I think what's exciting about the future of work is that it's automation and AI is really changing what tasks we do and how we do those tasks, and also where we do those tasks. So I hope that over the series, we can explore those three aspects a little bit. I don't have the answers to what those tasks look like. I actually see this series as a way to discover through all these people that we invite what's actually going on. But my personal take is at least that what's interesting and where a field like human-computer interaction comes in is that we can take this multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary perspective. So I think human-computer interaction researchers are very good at taking different perspectives, looking at research problems or societal problems from different angles. So I'm looking forward to seeing those different perspectives. As I'm based in a social science faculty, I'm looking forward to represent some of the social science researchers and to invite them to the conversation. But my other hat, I'm very interested in AI. So I also hope to get some AI researchers. And I hope that for many in the audience who's at least here at this moment live, it's not new that we need to think about more than just the tech. I think this is also what Anna was conveying before me, that we really want to think about what the human experience is, and that if there's new tech or new forms of automation, how it helps. During the introduction, Andrew, you mentioned that I was involved in audio UI, so that's where do we work comes in. So it's not just the home or the office, but maybe there will also be some work in the car. Now that's kind of scary to me at least, but there's people who want to do it to answer their email. So it's definitely an area to think about, like, well, can we actually do some work? And how would we do that? And is that actually harming safety? Is it even productive to do it, or should you just concentrate on the driving and on relaxing and getting Zen to work and Zen home? If the kids are not fighting on the back seat, of course. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to explore that. How automation changes things and these multidisciplinary and social science perspectives. That's, I think, my take.
Thank you, Chris. Helena, would you like to go next?
So I'm just going to continue the thought process there from Anna to Chris to me. So the way that I like to really challenge myself to think about the future of work right now to be highly socio-technical. So I think it's important to think about the specifics of the environment in which the work is situated. So that can be everything from the people that are there, the team that is working together, what's their history, organizational, social pressures that may be coming from that, cultural, and this is really hitting me right now, being in Denmark and seeing things in very different contexts. And then obviously socio-political as well, which, you know, we see always influencing what's happening, particularly within the US, socio-political structures that are occurring. And because of each of these nuances, I think one thing to think about the future of work is that there's not one homogeneous idea of what that is going to look like. I think the future of work and the practices and technology to support that really needs to be aware of those nuances, and it needs to be reactive and to be able to change with needs and circumstances as those come about. I've been thinking a lot also about the socio-technical aspect with regards to most of those of us in the HCI field come into a problem space, and we first of all frame it as a problem, and then we talk about what is the technological solution. And just to give an example of something that doesn't have a technological solution, my work in telemedicine for the past like 5 some odd years has really highlighted for me that it wasn't the technology that wasn't there, it was everything else. It was organizations, it was the hospital itself, for instance. It was the people that were involved. Some doctors liked it, some didn't. There were lawyers involved, insurance companies, how they were going to reimburse, all of this other stuff. You can see how so multi-layered. That's what really got between the vision and the actual implementation of telemedicine. Now, then COVID hit. And you see how that completely changes the socio-cultural, organizational issues. Technology really didn't change that much. Okay, we went from Skype to Zoom, but that really wasn't the big changer. So there's all these other layers, and this really requires us to be, going back to what Chris was saying, like multidisciplinary. You know, we need to be working with other folks and really talking about what is the role of technology, and maybe where's the technological solution maybe not the best place for us to be focusing to try to address the problem space. And the last thing I wanted to say about the future of work that I've been thinking a lot about, especially within education, is that I don't think what's happening right now is a good place for us to be constantly framing what the future of work is. What's happening right now is like emergency work and education by the skin of our teeth, and practices that we're kind of throwing together and we're making do in a lot of ways. And it's underneath this extremely stressful psychological trauma that pretty much the entire world is going under at the same time. And that is hopefully going to go away someday. and then what? We might not be going back to the way it was. We may be moving forward, but I don't think that this is a great example of what that forward actually looks like.
Thank you, Helena. That's thank you, everyone. Those are really interesting points. I like this idea of, you know, how does how does looking at COVID right now, these abrupt changes from the outside, does it provide a window, or what sort of a window does it provide? And I think Chris was also mentioning the social aspects of computing, and I really liked Anna's points about the fractured attention that the technology is built for, and now we're using it for work, and also the effects on the worker, the quality of the experience of the worker, as she put it. And then I think also really importantly, this idea of well-being, right, of what happens outside of work, and for that matter, what exactly is outside of work. I think that goes back to Helena's point too about what happened during COVID. So thank you for those points. I see that there are some questions from the audience in the chat. So again, if you have questions, please post them there. And if it works for you, then I'll just ask you to read the question or ask the question. So Michael, would you like to go first? I see you have a question for Chris.
Oh, thank you. It was sort of an off-the-wall question. So Chris, please don't feel like this requires an answer. I was thinking, and in a way, maybe this also speaks to what Helena was saying. We have these models. I'm sorry, my phone is binging and binging. We have these models that are sort of one-directional. Humans affect technology, technology shapes human experience. And then we also have these theories that say that it's much more interactional or emergent, if that word doesn't cause people to spit at this point. I'm thinking way back, Orlikowski was telling us about adaptive structuration theory, which was kind of a coevolution of work practices and technologies. And some of the infrastructuring work that Bowker is doing. So I'm just wondering, is it appropriate to think about models which are more back and forth, or are we at the moment kind of either, well, I don't even know how to end that sentence, so I'm going to say ... and stop talking.
I'm happy that you give me a carte blanche not to answer your question, because when I read it, I was like, I don't know all those theories in detail, so I'm not going to speculate about it. But I was happy that when you elaborated on it, it did give a bit more perspective that I can respond to. I think these interactional theories of back and forth are useful. The challenge is that if I think of my own thinking about human automation interaction, or how you sometimes see it in the literature, it's very easy to start compartmentalizing. This is what the automation does. This is what the human does, and that everyone, if you're an automation person, you'll specialize in the automation, and the social scientists will specialize in the human. I think we haven't solved it. I think there's more appreciation that they're a team, that they're a bigger system, so that the interaction part is useful. Now, how all these specific theories apply, I can't speak to. But I think it's valuable to think of these bigger frameworks, and at the same time, the individual components as well. So the challenge for interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary research is, of course, that to what extent you appreciate the initial sciences or the initial fields. Are they appreciated on their own? Or fields that bring different perspectives together, like HI, is that a field in itself? You quickly get into definition questions that get thorny, so I avoid those. But there needs to be room for both perspectives. So hopefully we can get insights from both the sort of those individual components as well as their interaction. And I guess the interaction part is the exciting bit for many HI people, and the team part is the exciting bit. Yeah. So I hope it addressed your question, at least partially.
Thank you. Yeah, it was great.
Thank you. Diana, you have a question for all, and given that it also relates to hospitals, maybe Helena can take a stab at at least answering first.
Yeah, sure. It's a little long-winded. So I had a question about the current events surrounding Facebook. So the outage really, I think, showed our reliance on these technologies, especially in work-related contexts. Like a lot of hospitals use WhatsApp to communicate amongst the staff, for instance, and a lot of people use Facebook for businesses and Instagram for businesses, but they're also the whistleblower that kind of highlighted these corporations may not have our best interests in mind a lot of the times. So just in general, what are your thoughts about this when the social media is so pervasive in our lives for work, for social things, obviously? Is not to ask this, what are the solutions? Like we could have a decentralized social media platform. We could make it a public thing, just a few things, but I just want to know y'all's general thoughts.
So yeah, that's actually a really good question, and particularly outside of Western countries, the WhatsApp, the pervasiveness of it was really amazing to see folks talking about that and how it's just like the backbone of society in some cases. I would not have probably had an answer before I started working with a colleague of mine who's really into regulatory compliance, and he's pretty much gotten me on board with this, that we really need stronger regulatory systems, at least in the US, where the majority of these social networking platforms are coming out, and the pervasiveness of them. And I think this is actually even more important from a health perspective, because I was actually just talking about this at a talk the other day, because some folks were questioning, like, well, how much do we have to worry about how we conceptualize healthcare and how we move forward with it from, you know, just some companies in the US. And I was like, you know, Google is right now building a extremely large health team, and Microsoft got out of the game, but they're probably getting back in the game as well. And these are not going to be small systems, and they are going to be pervasive, and they are going to probably go into environments that have the need for these types of systems. So just the exact same environments that we're so reliant on WhatsApp. So I think it comes down to the US taking a stronger rate. This is my opinion. I think the US needs to come, as a political body, needs to really start having these conversations and come in with stronger regulations and understand that it has implications for the wider world. I can't say what other countries and other environments need to be, political environments need to be doing from that point on, but at the very least, I think the US needs to take a very close look at the environment that they're creating for these companies to be able to just take over and create havoc. Complete and utter havoc in a day. Anybody want to disagree with me on that? I would love a battle.
I don't know. Is anybody? Let's see. So Catherine has a comment, and so does Nadia. I see Catherine's is about the regulatory work. So maybe Catherine, you could.
Sure, I'm not going to turn my camera on. It's too early in California for that. But I just wanted to say, you know, maybe channeling Lily Irani and folks like her, that it's a chicken and egg problem, Helena, right? Because in order to organize, to do that regulatory work, we might need different platforms to bring people together to gather, you know, because these platforms are slippery and they're more about the advertisers than they are, although they speak to community. We saw that radical community statement from that Facebook executive that was floating around on social media yesterday, but I'm not sure they really believe whereof they speak so far as that goes. So no solutions, but just brought that up as a sort of issue, underlying issue that might prevent what Helena's speaking to.
This is such a really good point, and I'm currently talking to Lily to see if we can get her to come on. So I set down with a question for her.
Very good, thank you. Nadia, do you want to bring up the robot issue? And I wonder if we can ask Anna to chime in.
Yeah, so back to Chris's point on the multidisciplinary nature of this issue. Like, I was reading this book called What to Expect When You're Expecting Robots, and like it talks about how it talks about the various entities that are involved when you want to actually like have robots get embedded into everyday lives. and automation get embedded and actually work in everyday life for people. And like they talk about the actual users, the bystanders and whatnot, and how when we are thinking about developing them, we should start thinking about those social aspects, all the regulatory aspects from the beginning, from the very design of the automation, rather than thinking of them post hoc when everything is all said and done. So yeah.
Yeah, I think there were lots of nodding there, so I think there are lots of people here who kind of agree with that kind of idea. It's been interesting, I think, when we've seen some of the big tech companies be questioned by governments about the way that they operate, and they've been unbelievably slippery. There's one example that I saw where they were asked whether they had behavioral scientists on their payroll, and they denied it. And I think they've kind of gone really close to the mark of thinking, no, we have no one with that job title. But, you know, absolutely, we know that those people are there because we know the individuals who are working in these organizations. So it's really quite incredible the lengths that they go to avoid regulation, I think. And you know, it's clearly something that we need to pay so much more attention to and really think about as we see these systems come online increasingly. But I thought one of the things that was really interesting with the WhatsApp outage was that the number of things that went down and how that impacted so many people, not just in their work context, but also in their personal life. So in Europe, it kind of happened, I think, halfway through the afternoon, and then it kind of went on into the evening. So I'm not sure that I really noticed that my colleagues who I share WhatsApp with all day long had gone quiet, because often, you know, they might go quiet if they're trying to do some work. But when I was sat there in the evening, I was kind of left with, well, what do I do with myself? Now there's no one to talk to, and that, you know, there's no scrolling through all of these things. And it was interesting, I think, the way perhaps people suddenly realized there were alternative ways to spend their time that might bring different qualities to the way they spend their time. So, you know, you might think, oh, well, I'll go out and take some exercise, seeing as I can't do that. And just like the way that we often get caught up in these like routines of our behavior, and how this like small disruptions can really change the way that we think about it.
Maybe I can add something to it.
Go ahead.
Naja, I think the issue that you raised is something that all of us can relate to, so we're nodding. And I think I've done that in the past. It's easy to get preachy, right? Like, oh, we should get involved as behavioral scientists, but I think it's very understandable, I think, that we're not involved from the start. It's something we want to change, but if you think of where the nature of the innovation comes from, it typically comes from some technological breakthrough, or someone who has a brilliant idea and creates a startup or creates some technology. And then all of a sudden that thing that they've developed gets used by humans, and they do it in all kinds of different ways. Or if it's a startup, all of a sudden, instead of having 3 employees, they grow to 30, or they go through 300. And all of a sudden, it's quite nice to have an HR department that regulates what the personnel is doing, and that there are people that are thinking about the direction. And I guess the challenge, which I don't have the solution to, except that it's easy to see from an HI perspective, is, well, when do these people get on board? And we all know the answer from the start, but it's typically not where that type of innovation comes from, because it's something new, and we make that connection, like, oh, this would also be useful for humans in that setting, and so that is hard. So yeah, it's a very difficult problem. I was also reminded with one of the previous questions, but I've forgotten which one, about so humans in automation and how they are using it. And I was thinking of Parasuraman's idea that you can use technology or you can misuse the automation, like over rely on automation. So thinking that your car will just drive itself and you can do all kinds of other stuff, whereas really that's not the capability of the automated vehicle. Or that you could start disusing it, so not using it because it hasn't been reliable yet, or that there's actually abuse of technology, so you're not thinking of all the consequences of using that automation. So that might be another useful lens of looking at this problem of that human automation interaction and human robot interaction. Because I guess what's a robot or what's not a robot, that to me it's quickly a robot or it's quickly AI or automation, and it doesn't have to have a robot like you see in the movies. Yeah.
But Chris, isn't this where like that multidisciplinary aspect comes into play again? Because not everybody has the same angle to look at a space, and we'll see the same problems coming up. I have a colleague, brilliant computer scientist, is about to, I don't know if it's public knowledge yet, so I won't name who it is, but is about to join the FCC. Super excited about this. But when she was approached, she's like, I just want you to know, I know nothing about policy. This is Communications Commission. So this is one of those regulatory bodies. And she goes, I know nothing about policy. I'm a computer scientist and I'm an ethicist within that field. And their answer was, we know that. We realize that we need to create the team inside that has all these different knowledge bases. And so I'm excited to find out more about who else is on this team. And I hope that they're, continuing to get an interdisciplinary team to look at this as a problem space. But I don't think, any one of us ever have the answer. And I think it was Anna who put in the chat that technologies and their use evolve as well. So we always have to be like aware of this needs to be rethought, this needs to be reconsidered. That's something for, I think, also policymakers need to be considering as well, that they don't know what the future is going to be. So they need to be adapted as well. It's a huge problem. I'm glad I'm not doing it alone.
Thank you. So yes, there are a couple of comments. Max didn't notice Facebook going down, I guess. And Lewis argues that that's because we should be on some other platform. And then maybe we can wrap up the conversation, at least the recorded part, with Lewis's question. If you want to go ahead, Lewis.
Well, it's pretty much what I wrote there. I just like an open question to those who have actually worked closely with enterprises or institutions in terms of the insights of how value systems are established. Because we could be here talking about what would be an ideal system, and we would all be implicitly introducing our own value system into what we design systems for. At the pragmatic level, to actually see change, I'd just like to know if there's anyone here with experience on how best to impact people who actually make decisions about deployment, about corporate culture, and things like that. Because I have none of such experience, so I'd just like to find out if anyone has such experience.
So mine is biased. The company that I've been most working with recently has been Mozilla, and they have a value of thinking about an open, free internet, privacy, equity, values that I think are interesting to work with. So so that actually would probably bias. Of course, I did work at Microsoft back in the day. And I would say that that's a little bit different, although they were not evil anymore. They were not the list of evil. Everything is still very much focused on how does this turn into product that we can sell. So you have to do the translation for them.
So how would you advise academic researchers, especially those with minimal industry experience, in terms of communicating in a way that might make its way eventually, or to start projects, right? Because I'm also perfectly aware that if I start a project with someone at Microsoft Research, that may not necessarily have any impact or lend any insight into their day-to-day operations, right? So what's the best way, if I genuinely want to start projects that is savvy to day-to-day operations, to work culture, to the value system, how would I gain access into having that insight? And perhaps after that to go like, I never want to go near that again, right? But still, I'm just really curious, on how best to engage in that conversation.
So it used to be the case that Microsoft Research was very much separate from Microsoft Product. That's becoming a tighter relationship now. So something that you work on in research could be moving over to product. And it depends on the researcher that you're working with, obviously. But I think this is where I'm really looking forward to the days when we have conferences again. I know it's like really bad to say this from a sustainability aspect, but occasionally being able to go and meet the folks that are at like those booths, those are usually folks that are actually working on product. And they have some of the most interesting questions that you can engage in. Or maybe if you're lucky, you have a grad like a grad school buddy who ended up now working in one of those companies. You can contact them and be like, who's working on this problem space? That's been my experience. That's what I'm really hoping for is I mean, I know that going to conferences is not the best thing in the world for many reasons, including health and wellness, but that's the part that I think we're all missing out on, having that relationship with product and the companies that care about our research.
Thanks.
Ooh, Michael Muller, who actually works at a company, raised his hand. Maybe he has some.
Some words from the belly of the beast, for what it's worth, or one of the beasts, a beast that is getting smaller. And so this is one of those irritating social science, well, it depends, say, paragraphs. Sometimes what you might want to do is gain access to a population for study, like software engineers. Sometimes what you might want to do is to have an impact on product, but then I hope you're not doing unwaged work for the beast, because that wouldn't be, there would be little justice in your working hard without pay in order to make IBM's stockholders richer. I mean, I have to do that, but at least they pay me for it. So just some thoughts there. But I'm thinking, for example, in the space of, say, AI systems and explainability, there are people doing really interesting research, capital R research at Microsoft. Sudume would be a good example on how to do explainability in ways that are more effective for end users. Verilao at IBM has been doing much the same thing. If we were to talk to the product groups, they would say things like, well, you know, the point of explainability is to increase trust, because the point of trust is to increase, well, sales. And so what we want is, and then we're in a sort of capologic persuasion domain in which the whole point of an explanation is to sell product. Whether the, Helena, I love your smile at this point, because I'm just gonna ram this one through and say whether the explanation is correct or not. I mean, it might be sort of business correct if it makes the people think that it's a great product. Whether it actually explains what happened in the algorithm could be a different question. IBM would never operate this way, but yeah. Or you might talk with the product team and find out that efficiency is the thing they need to work on, because, well, frankly, the IBM product team and the Microsoft product team are in competition with each other, and what their clients want is more efficient AI systems that require a smaller server farm, blah, 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 blah. So, what kind of thing do you want to do with industry? What is it that industry might be able to do to help you with your research program? And how much of yourself are you willing to sacrifice in order to make the beast happier, whichever beast you happen to choose? I think I'm really glad the recorder is turned off.
Oh no, no, it isn't. But if you'd
Oh,
like, we can.
oops.
We can do stuff.
Oh well. Now I feel like my career is over, but okay.
We can edit it out with movie magic, don't worry.
That's true.
So somewhat related to that, I'm just wondering the extent to which we could effectively be seeding ideas and terms that might then be picked up by corporations or institutions as viable business models. And how we could go about doing that by coming up with catchy phrases like explainable AI, human machine partnerships. And so I'm just wondering, across the last, let's say 10, 20 years, where have the trends been coming from? Has it truly been bidirectional, or have academic conferences have had a lot to do in terms of allowing researchers within corporations to be able to, feed and create business models or business cases to product developers? I mean, there's no definitive answer, but I'm just, I just like to pick people's brains, those with experience on this regard.
When we're talking, Helena, this is about to come at you again, because when we're talking about business models, I need to run screaming from the room because I don't understand them, and I certainly don't want to misinform you. So I'm hoping somebody else can answer that question, because I'm much more on the how does a researcher have an idea that can be given away to a product group in such a way that they can turn it into their own idea, which will involve changing it, and in some ways will involve improving it. We did a sort of an amateurish UI design on an internal crowdfunding project. We gave it away to another part of IBM. They did the professional design. They added features we'd never had time to add, and they made a really huge research success by adding those features. And they allowed me to use their data, which was amazingly nice of them. So I don't understand business stuff. There we are. And I hope somebody else in the conversation does.
Maybe I can add something to it. I don't understand business stuff, but I guess I can give a chip on the shoulder to some of the conferences that I know all of us go to. So if Lewis, we go to quite the same types of conferences. So we go to HEI related conferences, and we go to more cognitive science oriented conferences. So one thing I appreciated more and more over the last decade is that at those HEI conferences that there are actually people from industry, whether it's at Automotive UI or at CHI or some of the other conferences. So there is actually a platform where there's that engagement. And what I think some of the more traditional academic disciplines, HI is also pretty established, of course, but if you look at disciplines that are even older, like psychology or even older, physics, it tends to be more isolated. So that crosstalk is, at least from my experience, that crosstalk is less there. So where is it exactly coming from? I don't know. I also like the suggestion that was in the chat by Catherine, with this art that our students are doing internships in industry and coming in with ideas and changing the mindset and slowly changing. That's at least how I hope that I can contribute to some change in the world. I'm always happy if some of my students end up in good positions in industry and can use their brains to do good. So still don't know where it's coming from, but I like that there's that crosstalk. That's the only thing I wanted to say. And I, again, if we're talking about where do I hope that this platform goes to for this symposium, I hope that we can have some of that crosstalk here, that we can have some, like we have today already, right? Some speakers from industry and from academia, because I don't think that either of the two has all the answers. So we need to talk.
That's a really good point. I think that's a really good point, Chris. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for the discussion. What I would suggest is that we wrap up the recorded part, and we still have some time to stick around. As we do that, I quickly wanted to mention that next week, Max Wilson will join us. I know he was here earlier, and we will talk about mental workload as personal data in the future of work. So that's certainly very much in line with what we've been talking about.